Um, but yeah, welcome everyone to our Snowy Mountains virtual tasting. As per usual, if you've got 6 glasses, awesome. Pour them all out. I will share the tasting order in the chat right now for everyone while I remember. But yeah, we've got the wonderful Mark Newton, who is the brains, the brawn, and the behind behind Snowy Mountain Spirits. So leave your questions in the chat, put your tasting notes in the chat, but I'll get you to kick us off, Mark, with telling us what is Snowy Mountains? Where did you come up with it? How did you get into this? I know that's a big question. So.
No, that's great. That's great. What I'll actually get you to do is grab your first glass of bourbon while I talk, so that your tongue doesn't get too nervous about not getting a drink. So Snowy Mountain Spirits actually started. I've been connected to the Snowy Mountains for many, many years. I was sitting down today thinking about it, and I thought, oh, it's almost 45 years I've been connected to the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales. I used to work with young offenders, and we used to take them down to the Snowy Mountains and put them through survival programs and survival techniques to build their self-esteem. And that's kind of my original connection. And I've got a deep connection down there with the Bayabdo Wilderness and some Aboriginal elders and other companies down there. And it feeds my soul, the Snowy Mountains. Where the Snowy Mountain Spirits came about was 2 of my mates and myself were tasting in the US, in Vermont. We were tasting all these bourbon and all these different whiskies. And it was just incredible, the range of flavors that we were tasting. So we all decided to do the whiskey making course down at Old Kempton in Tasmania, and which, by the way, is a great course. I highly recommend it. We did that down at Old Kempton, and I just fell in love with the alchemy of whiskey production. The fact that you can tweak this and you can tweak that, and you can produce something that's quite incredible. So I decided to start buying new make spirit from Tasmania. This is after all the paperwork. There's loads and loads of paperwork. Buying new make spirit from Tasmania, from Old Kempton. I use a few distilleries down there, but this is from Old Kempton, and bring it up to the Snowy Mountains to my bond store, which is at 1,200 meters above sea level, and put it into barrels that I've sourced from around the world. So this particular one, the bourbon, the barrels are from Heaven Hill Distillery in Kentucky in the US, 200-litre barrels, American oak, of course, 200-litre barrels that have been recoopered and heavily charred by Cask company. And then I filled them with this beautiful new make from Old Kempton. This particular one's been in barrels for 3 years. So went into barrels in 2019, October 2019, and came out in about November 2022. So the great thing about being in the Snowy Mountains is that we get incredible variation in temperatures. We get cold, snowy winters, and we get really, really hot summers. This particular whiskey, and in fact, 3 of the whiskies you'll be tasting tonight, 4 of the whiskies you'll be tasting tonight, have been through the bushfires. So those really terrible bushfires we had across the country, the bushfires got within 50 kilometres of my bond store down there. I've got videos of me with the tractor and having whiskey in the bucket of the tractor, moving it up to my mate's garage. He wasn't that impressed having highly flammable liquid in his garage, but I said, hey, mate, if your house goes up, we're all buggered anyway. So enjoy it. So enjoy the first wee dram. Is that what you're after, Emma?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's very exciting. I'm really curious as to, so you're saying you source the spirit from Old Kempton Distillery and a couple of other Tasmanian guys. So I suppose you classify yourself as an independent bottler, even though you mature the whiskey in your own store?
Yeah. I think officially I'm called an independent bottler. I actually don't like that term, because some people that are independent bottlers don't do anything to the whiskey. So I call myself a producer because I basically get the new make spirit and I change it from what it was to make whiskey out of it. So and I'll do various things, move things around in in the bond store. We'll get the barrels out. This is one of my barrels. This is a photograph of the just outside the bond store when it snowed once. So I'll get the barrels out and introduce them to the snow and leave them in the snow for a day and then get them back in. And I learned some stuff from Tim Duckett down in Tasmania, who does interesting things with his whiskey. He sings to it, he plays music to it, he beats it sometimes, he rolls it out in the sun. I do some of those things. I don't beat it, but I do play music to it and I'll roll it out in the sun. And some I'll just leave in the bond store in exactly the same position that I've had it in. So so it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, cool. It's I think that's interesting that producer rather than independent bottler. Something, and please guys, I feel like I'm asking all the questions, but what made you choose bottling and maturing over distilling?
It was literally a price point. It was a much easier entry into the whiskey production market than it is buying a still and all the approvals that have to go with buying a still. There was enough approvals, like 15 megs of data to the ATO and 15 megs of data to the police, and and doing the community consultations and all that kind of stuff. That was enough, let alone having a still. So I just thought, and I still may one day, but that was a pun. But there may be a still coming one day, who knows, but not at the moment. I'm really loving what I'm doing, and while people are still enjoying my whiskey, I'm interested. Can we get feedback from people? Is that, what do people think?
What do you guys think? I get a lot of those orange cream chocolates in a roses box. It's got like some of that orange cream filling, a little bit of graham crackers. But yeah, Ollie's just commented that he's very impressed you got ATO and all the various levels of government to agree to a bond store in the Snowy Mountains. I can't even imagine the bureaucracy involved there.
And the council, you've got to spend, council's the most important one. If you don't get council, forget everything else. ATO, yes, you have to get all the approvals, but they're going to take your money. So they're happier to approve you, and they'll even walk you through the process. The councils are probably the toughest, and police probably second, because they listen to what councils say. But yeah, that's all fun. And it was actually helpful for a mate of mine who set up a bar in Jindabyne. He was asking advice afterwards, so I could advise him on what direction he needed to go in. Yeah. Feedback from the people that are tasting it. I'm interested to know what you thought of the bourbon expression from an ex-bourbon cask.
Pop your tasting notes in the chat. I know Leo's always got some stellar tasting notes.
And everyone on the call has my tasting notes, or the tasting notes that I sent?
No.
Okay.
We've tried to, we can if you really want to. It's always fun to get the unbiased feedback.
Yeah, no, I'm more interested in that. That's why I was asking the question. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, as well, all of these whiskies are very high ABV as well. If anyone's adding water and finding them a bit harsh, Alan says it's smooth, the 56.5%. Yeah, absolutely, Leo. Much more complexity than one would normally expect from a bourbon cask. Yeah, I totally agree. It doesn't hit like the ABV that it says, though. My samples are handwritten on, and I've already lost the ABV. So when I go back to that sample, I will never know.
It's interesting. I get that with a lot of my whiskies, and they're high ABVs for a reason, and it's about flavour. I proof my whiskies down. A lot of people would call 60% or 56%, 57%. They call that cask strength. Because I basically proof it down with some spring water, it's not cask strength. So I'm just being honest, it's not cask strength, it's high ABVs. But I think with mine, you get the heat, but not the burn. And I'm always really impressed. And I think that's the spirit that I get from Old Kempton. It's very good quality spirit, because I tried spirit from some other distilleries and found that they just weren't rounding out in the casks like I wanted them to. So I kept it at high ABV. I think I know where the spot is. Then I'll take it further and I lose the flavour. Then I bring it back, and then I'll put it in front of my tasting panel, which is 3 distillers, and take their feedback. And based on their feedback, I'll adjust it up or down, depending on how sober they are at the end of the tasting sessions.
Fair enough. Yeah, Ollie was saying we're starting to hear the term distiller's strength a lot more. I think Archie Rose pioneered that with their gin, but I think it's probably a more apt term for a lot of whiskies. When you add the water, is that at the start of, like, what do you fill it a standard fill, or and then you add the water at the end of the process, or do you proof it down at the start?
So no. It goes in as new make spirit, white spirit from Old Kempton, straight from Old Kempton into the barrel at 63.4% ABV. That's the Scottish standard, and that's what it goes into the barrel. The wonderful thing that happens in the Snowy Mountains, because we have very dry, or much drier and higher altitude, angels are pretty thirsty. So these particular whiskies, or this particular whiskey, I lose 17% over a 3-year period in a 50-litre cask. These are all in 50-litre casks, except for the bourbon port that I'll talk about in a sec. The angels are share, but what are fierce. But what I lose in angel share, I gain in flavour, because what happens is that, not like Scotland, which are at sea level and are much more humid kind of areas, they lose water. What I lose they lose alcohol content. What I lose is water. So my alcohol content can go up, and often does. I released last year a whiskey, director strength whiskey, which was 67.5%. And you think that's incredibly high, but again, it was very smooth, and that was just really rounded out. And that was the alcohol content going up because of angel share, who were pretty severe on that particular cask.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I proof at the end. So I decant the whiskey into stainless steel containers, let it sit, let it rest, and then wake it up with a when I start to decant when I proof it down with some water. Yeah.
Fair enough. Love that, Paul. Less trouble for the angels. Yeah, the angels love Australian whiskey.
No, they totally do, particularly in the Snowy Mountains. But it's I like them because they actually, I think it improves my whiskey, particularly the really dry summers. These ones, again, being through that dry stuff where the grass was cracking under your feet, to really cold winters. And as I said before, this is one of my photographs of just near the Bond store one year when it snowed, and I just put a couple of barrels out there.
Yeah. Cool.
Should we move on to the Tawny cask?
I was gonna say, we were talking about the bourbon port cask before.
Oh, sorry, bourbon port. You're right.
Onto the bourbon port cask. So you said most of these are 50-litre barrels, was it?
Yeah. So this one wasn't. This was the bourbon port cask was in a 20-litre barrel. There are only 66 bottles of this produced. I've got about 10 left. And this I released at 57.3% ABV. What I did with this is that I kept it, this is a shorter maturation period. I kept it in 20-litre casks for 2 years, and then I moved the whiskey out of the ex-bourbon cask into an export cask. And I didn't know what was going to come out. You sort of think, let's see what's happened here. So I finished it in an export cask. And this is the result after 3 months in the export cask. So what you get is you'll get the bourbon, typical bourbon, the caramels and the vanillas on the nose, and you'll get some, when you start to sip it, you'll get the fact that there's something else going on there. And on the back of the palate, you start to get the Tawny, the port coming through as well. So you got a combo of the bourbon port in this. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael said the ABV is more noticeable, but there's still no kind of like lingering harshness. Yeah. Also, Leah, I love
that's a good pickup. And I think the reason for that is it's a shorter maturation period in a smaller cask. So you're getting those two factors influencing the alcohol content, therefore the maturation of the whiskey. Whereas I think the 3 years have rounded out better than the 2 years cask. Although this is all I've got left of the 2 year casks. They all sold out. So people kind of like them, I suppose.
Yeah, it's got this real like kind of wine gums note to it.
Yeah,
super interesting. So when you say port cask, are you sourcing your casks? Like where are you sourcing your casks from? I suppose we always know distillers are getting them relatively directly, but do you work with a cask broker? Obviously, you get some barrels from Heaven Hill, but the port barrels, are they from Portugal?
Yeah, this particular barrel came from South Australia, from Grant Burge. Heaven Hill Distillery with the bourbon and the Grant Burge for the port. Yeah, so they're the two 20-litre casks that came into this one. As I said, the bourbon cask came from Heaven Hill Distillery. I do use a broker, and it's great because they can do all the deals and stuff, and then I'll get the casks and I'll figure out what I do with them then, whether I get them recharred or not. There are a few casks that I've got. I've got some Oloroso casks and some PX casks I got from Spain that have got some new make spirit in them now, and they'll be ready not for a few years yet. I've also got a ex-Shiraz cask I got from a friend who owns a vineyard up in Orange, and sent that down to Peter Bignell for him to char it for me. And he's got this fantastic photograph of this huge flames coming out of this barrel. So I had the mad scientist do that, and put some of his new make spirit in and then send it back. So that's very exciting to see. And that's a 220-litre cask.
I feel like Peter Bignell is the last person anybody should give a flamethrower to.
That's right. You should. I should.
Do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Cool.
So are people done with that one? Are you any other feedback on the bourbon port?
Yeah, so Leo says honey and caramel on the palate, silky smooth, getting delightful fresh fried chips aroma.
Oh.
Oh yeah, like when you open a fresh bag of like fancy crisps and so that goodie.
Oh, that's interesting.
Flavoring hits you.
I thought you were relating the chips to Peter Bignell's distillery because he runs it on fish and chip oil.
I know, right? I hear apparently that his fish and chip oil supply was diverted without him knowing for a bit. So he was like, "Where's my oil?" But I think he sorted it out with them now. But there were talks about setting up a pipe directly there.
He does have a backup plan. He told me down at Whisky Capital in Canberra recently that he said, "Do you know what happens with all these batteries in cars and all these solar batteries that are now spent?" And I said, "No idea." He said, "I'm taking them." And he said, "I'm going to line them all up and I'm going to hook them all up and have this great power generation plant down in Tassie." I thought only Peter could do that.
I mean, like all that lithium, all those like corrosive chemicals. He's a braver man than
what could possibly go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah. Correction, Leo's getting fresh hot chips, but without the nasty, greasy finish. Wait,
oh, there you go. Thank you, Leo.
Now, I think Ollie had a question a while ago that is, I think, perfect for here. So obviously you have a lot of Heaven Hill bourbon casks. Do you get bourbon casks from other distilleries as well, or is it just Heaven Hill that you've got at the moment? I haven't,
just Heaven Hill at the moment. I haven't got bourbon. Oh, sorry, except for when we'll get to taste the rum cask. The rum cask actually originally came from, and I've got a mental blank as I'm saying this, Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
The rum cask came originally from Buffalo Trace, had 5 years of bourbon in it, or bourbon in it for 5 years, and then had Beanley rum in it for 5 years. So you'll get an interesting combo there. But because it came out of a rum cask, I call it an rum expression rather than a double cask.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Always saying agreed, heaps of honey, caramel, very silky. So shall we trek on to the next whiskey?
Yes.
Tawny cask. So this is obviously an Australian Tawny cask as well.
That's right, from South Australia, from Grant Burge.
Yeah.
It was a 200-litre cask that was recoopered down to a 50-litre cask, again down for 3 years. Only 93 bottles of this produced, 55.2% ABV. I actually took there's an event that happens up in Capertee near Crafty's place up there that at March last year, and I took some of my Tawny up there, and one of the guys tasted it and said, when you release it, I want 40 of your bottles. So I've only got half of that left now because he was true to his word. He loved it so much that you'll get this very clearly. It's a Tawny cask that speaks well to the provenance of the barrel. It's a lot sweeter, very rounded, full mouth feel, good legs. But that's my impression. I don't want to speak for your mouth because I'm sure your mouth can speak for itself.
Well, yeah, that seems like it was a good problem to have, and well worth the trip up to Crafty's and to the event and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mike was curious how many years, sorry, hiccups.
Say that again.
How many years, Mike asking how many years was this aged again?
3 years.
3 years?
So interestingly tonight, and I think Ollie actually sent this out in the communication, that the bourbon, the Tawny, and the Director's Reserve and the rum cask was all exactly the same new make spirit, put into barrels at exactly the same time and decanted pretty much in the same week. So the only variation there would be the week of decanting and the type of barrel that's in. So with the bourbon, the Tawny, Director's Reserve that's coming up, and then the Director's Reserve Apera, and then the Director's Reserve rum are all the same new make spirit. So what you're getting is absolute barrel variation, the influence of the barrel. And we know that 70 to 80% of the 100% of the color and 70 to 80% of the flavor comes from the barrel. So this is a perfect example of that, where the Tawny and the bourbon were from exactly the same new make.
Yeah. So with the new make, so all these ones we're trying tonight are from Old Kempton new make, are they?
Old Kempton.
Yeah.
All Old Kempton new make.
Yeah, cool. Have you got like a dream distillery either in Australia or from like Scotland that you'd love to get some new make from?
I've got a number of dream distilleries that I'd like to get new make from, but yeah. In fact, I've been talking to a few distilleries in the US and in fact, one in Japan as well. We've just the other week established what we've called a Alpine Producers Collective, where basically people that produce spirits in the high country, because it's different to anywhere else. We're sharing ideas and sharing samples and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty exciting as well. So yeah, looking at exchanging some stuff around and moving some barrels around and getting some spirit from other places for sure.
Yeah, cool. Got some great tasting notes. Very fruity, sweetness of peach and nectarines. Like it says light florals on the notes. One of the stone fruits, possibly super ripe white nectarines. That is absolutely what I'm getting. White nectar, like I'm getting white peaches, right. Like a little bit of fuzz.
Right. Yeah.
I'm also getting a lot of.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, delicate sweetness.
Yeah, peaches and stone fruit. I get. Yeah, nice.
Absolutely.
I love this. The interesting thing and I'm happy to confess, I enjoy my whiskey neat, but I also enjoy my whiskey with a block of ice in it. I know it's almost like I'm a heretic for saying that, but I do. And the reason I do is because it's such high ABV that if I put a block of ice in there, for the next 15 minutes, I get to experience this array of flavors that actually the whiskey releases as the ice melts and the proof comes down. So if anyone wants to try that, I'd certainly challenge them to try that, because they become even more beautiful than they are neat, I think, as they open up with a bit of ice.
Would you say these are good old-fashioned whiskies for old-fashioned cocktails?
Probably. Oh, well, in fact, a friend of mine made a Manhattan with the bourbon port the other day. In fact, the guy that we started the whole idea of whiskey making together, he's a sculptor, and he was staying here the other day, and he said, let me make you a Manhattan with one of your whiskeys. They're pretty expensive whiskies to be making cocktails out of, but we used the bourbon port to make a Manhattan. And he insisted on using Canadian maple syrup in there as well, and a few other interesting things. But it was just delicious.
No sweetener Absolutely. In a Manhattan. He was lying to you. He doesn't know how to make a Manhattan.
Well, there you go. I'll have to send you the recipe.
Done.
Maybe it was an old-fashioned. Yeah. Maybe they call it a Manhattan in America. I don't know
what they call it in America. Cocktails over there are wildly different from how we make them here in Australia. And we probably make them a bit better here in Australia. Leo's saying it's got a really sweet palate, but it quickly becomes a little bit overwritten by the ABV, and the finish is a bit short. Yeah, they're definitely not, as Tim Ducker would call them, Brontosaurus whiskies, which I'm not too mad about personally. You know, it's always nice to be going back for more and not still be in the finish end. But I totally mean Leo as well. Sometimes you don't want to finish your whiskey in 3 minutes.
Yeah, and that's why I suggest with this particular one too, that this is the one I love with a piece of ice in it, because it just lingers on for a long time after that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Now, shall we move on to the Apera Director's Reserve?
Yep. We can. 64.2% ABV. So again, it's certainly up there. This is literally from the cask into the bottle. And again, the Apera cask, this came from Hanwood Estate in South Australia, the large 220-litre cask broken down to a 50-litre cask with heavy char, and then in barrels for 3 years in the Snowy Mountains. Apera, as you know, is sherry, but we can't call it sherry anymore. We call it Apera, like we can't call it port, we call it Tawny. So this is the Apera cask that is cask strength. Again, the ABV went up while the Angels were thirsty in this particular one.
Yeah. Leo was asking before, those Old Kempton bottles. I assume you get more from Old Kempton than just the New Make Spirit. Yeah, you source the bottles.
I love the bottles. I absolutely love the bottles from Old Kempton, and because Saberglass actually sells them, I think, well, it's all fair and good. And I did talk to them down there about using them, and they were fine. There's actually another 1 or 2 people using the bottles. People seem to love the bottles too, because they're very decanter-like. And in fact, someone bought a couple of bottles and gave one to a girlfriend on the condition that she gave the bottle back to her when she was finished.
I think they're probably also very convenient to stack. You can just stack them on their
sides. They are.
And see exactly what it is that you want. You know, they serve more purpose. They save space.
Yeah, that's true.
This cabinet is what we're saying.
Hey, Mark, in this whiskey, the Rector's Reserve, where's that smoky, meaty note coming from?
The bushfire smoke. That's what I thought of.
Yeah. You know, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I'd like to know, but all I can say is that the interaction of the spirit with the heavy char is what you're getting there. Because I noticed when I decanted it, there was a lot more charcoal coming out in the decanting. So I'm figuring that maybe it was a heavier char in that particular barrel. It might have even been a crocodile char when I look inside. So maybe that was the difference.
Because we've tried some a Victorian distillery who's sort of in the high country as well. They their red gum casks had an element of this smokiness in it as well, but they had to really char it, I think, because it's not oak, obviously. So you might be right in that regard.
That's the only thing that I can think of that was a heavier char.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's given me it's s'mores. I know that obviously it's a very American thing, but you know, when you get those big jumbo marshmallows and
Yeah.
maybe burn them a little bit in the fire by accident, you know, that sweetness and that like viscosity, everyone else is loving it as well. The flavor at that ABV is fantastic achievement, says Michael. Leo, just straight up, that is awesome whiskey. And I mean, it's simple, but it's accurate. And honestly, for 64% ABV or 64 point something, just liquidy.
4.2, yes.
It's just viscous,
Yeah.
but it's not hot, it's not abrasive in the way that one might expect. And this was a 50-liter cask as well, was it?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, my distilling panel, I had to write with one of their quotes in there. One of the distillers on my tasting panel said it's a whiskey drinker's whiskey that takes you straight to smoky bars with leather lounges and, you know, that kind of stuff. It's a whiskey that deserved to be savoured over time. And I thought that was a really interesting comment from someone. I thought, I'll use that.
Yeah. Use it, take it to the bank, run with it.
Yeah. And it was interesting, Ollie, when I first decanted this, I thought, oh my God, what's wrong with that? When I first opened the barrel, took the bung out, I thought, hang on, that's kind of unusual, but it kind of grew on me over time, and I just became to really like it. And I liked it so much, and when I put it in front of my tasting panel, they thought, yeah, leave it at cask strength.
I'm getting on the nose, like once you've had a couple of sips, and I think your palate gets used to the higher alcohol content, you can stick your nose right in the glass. I'm getting like outside the caramels, the fruits. It's either marzipan, but it's also like there's a tea. I drink a lot of Dilma tea, and that black tea vibe notes, but there is a floral element there as well. I don't know what it is, but it's unique. I like it.
It's like one of those Chinese black teas.
Yeah, those. Yep.
Kind of.
Ah, right.
Yum cha tea.
Yeah. No, I get that as well. That's kind of, well, I had in my tasting note, I had cypress tips. But caramel, a marzipan I had in there. Orange pico tea. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say as well, I got the opportunity to try a gin that was made with grapes that were affected by the bushfires, and that gin, the smoke in that and the smoke in this are very similar. So I think it was a heavy char, but I think that there is like a little bit of that bushfire smoke that kind of wheedled its way in. But at that ABV, it just makes it beautiful. Like, it's not overpowering.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the smoke was incredibly thick.
Yeah.
It was very scary. It was actually very scary because it was just so thick. You had no idea, and we just had a whole plan there, and the fire brigade came down and check out the property and all that kind of stuff, and they were a bit nervous of all this high.
Essentially a Hindenburg in the snowy mountains, right?
That's exactly like. But it was, I wouldn't be surprised because this was one of the barrels that I had a lot of angel share out of. In fact, like this, there's only 85 bottles that were produced. So there was a lot of angel share out of this barrel, which means it's much more porous. So what goes out could possibly come back in. So you could get some of the bushfires in that. Yeah. Maybe that could be a marketing thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't imagine how surreal it would have been for you. Actually, the first time I ever went to Sydney was during the bushfires, and my flight back to Melbourne was the last flight that they allowed before they cancelled all of them because the smoke got too thick. It was terrifying for me in the air. I can't even imagine how it would have been on the ground being able to see that. So that's right. And there's probably some people on this Zoom call that went through it as well. It's very frightening because when everything goes black, you kind of think, what the hell's going on? It's middle of the morning, sort of, very freaky. But a lot of good will and good people around to stop them, which was fantastic. Yeah. You guys were very, very lucky and
we were
very fortunate.
No, we were.
Now, on a very different, I suppose, tangent of a question after talking about something so serious and affecting as the bushfires, but are you familiar with distilleries or bottlers that have blended spirit together before barrel aging it? So like it's a blended single cask malt. Have you
mean
seen
blending? Do you mean blending the new make or blending the whiskey after the whiskey is being produced?
Blending the new make. We heard from the guys at Arden American that they're doing a blended new make with Dornock. And Digestive Dram did a bottling. Is that something you'd think about potentially?
That's interesting. I'd be interested to hear what happens there, given that I think the new make's critical, but the cask influence is much greater than the new make. So I'm wondering whether you end up getting an averaging effect when you blend that new make, and maybe you lose. I don't know. They're all just the things going through, because I haven't experienced that yet. So it'd be interesting to hear about. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, Em, if you pull the Digestive Dram behind you, I can see it. I've completely forgotten all 4 distilleries, but it was Clynelish, Glenmoray, and...
So it was Clynelish, Dalmore, Glenmorangie, and Glenturret.
Yep. So the lemonness of Clynelish is still present in that new make in the whiskey. 27 years it was matured in a single cask. Then I think the 2 Glens, personally for me, felt like they just taste like they're both normal Speyside whiskies. And then there was a bit of a orangey marmalade note, I think, that has come through from the Glenmorangie as well, because it's such a light fruity spirit. So it did, even after 27 years in such a thick cask, like the lemon note of the Clynelish just stood out for me. Like I know I can pick a Clynelish from a mile away now. I just love it so much, and it was unique that this concept could even come up.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I hadn't heard of it, so I'll actually go exploring tomorrow on the internet and just figure out what it's all about and the pros and cons. I'm sure Andrew Delridge would be writing an article on it for the pros and cons one day, and we can all sit back and listen to that.
Yeah, well, if you find yourself down in Melbourne, I've still got some. So
yeah,
I'm taking some down to Hobart for Connell from Adelphi Arden American for him to try, because he was like, I'd never ordered it done. I'm like, mate, you're late to the game. But I think it'd be really good as well, especially if you're working with a lot of Tassie distilleries, like Belgrove and Old Kempton, you can soften out some of the Belgrove from with the Old Kempton new make, and then barrel that. The only question is labeling it at the end becomes a little bit difficult. So
that's right.
Yeah, I think
you add Tasmanian distilleries.
Yeah, I think this one says single cask blended malt Scotch whiskey. So
right.
So, yeah. Leo asks, didn't Whiskey Sponge do that with one of their casks? I'm not sure, but we shall ask Angus next time we chat to him. It's definitely on my list to ask him. So shall we move on to the final dram of tonight as well? The rum cask reserve.
Director's Reserve cask strength. This isn't released yet, but will be released in July. It's a cask strength 60%. So again, I lost Angel Share. Took some of the alcohol content out of this as well for some strange reason. I'm not sure why, but that's what. There's 84 bottles of this produced, and it's, as I said before, this actually came from a Buffalo Trace cask that had bourbon in it for about 5 years, and then Beanley rum. I actually got the cask from Beanley Rum in Queensland, and they had rum in it for about 5 years. So you get quite an interesting, I think, an interesting palette to this one. It's different. It's different to the others. I think again with a high IBV, you get this subtle notes of wood. Nana's fruitcake is kind of what I kind of was getting particularly on the nose. And then when I put this in front of the tasting panel, we're going, what is that? What is that? And then someone went, violet crumble. And it was kind of like, yep, that's what it is. And we're all sort of looking at each other for a while going, what is that? And it was violet crumble was the kind of notes they were getting as well. But anyway, enjoy. Tell me what you think.
It's definitely very honeyed, but I initially get this nose of poppadoms, like that.
Oh, okay.
It's such a bizarre note to get, I know, but it's got that like softness of like the poppadoms, but then like you give it a bit more of an inhale, and that honey character comes through. Yeah, Michael says that rum influence is very interesting. Is anyone here familiar with Beanley Distillery? Put your hand up if you've tried Beanley before. Paul, Leo, Ollie, Darren. Yeah, cool. Like I know in terms of Australian rum, we all talk about Bundaberg, but Beanley was the OG. Beanley Distillery was pretty much the predominant rum distillery in Australia for a very long time. They make this amazing honey rum liqueur, which I don't know if they do it anymore. They used to back when I was a baby bartender, and the smell reminds me of that as well. Like just this, like eating honey fresh off the comb, fresh off the comb. Super.
Someone's picking up almond in that as well.
Yeah. Always wondering how old this one is. Is this 3 years as well?
Again, this is 3 years, same new make as the. I sound like I'm repeating myself, but everything except for the bourbon port is exactly the same new make. So that's, again, what you're getting is fantastic influence of the cask.
Yeah.
It's the same as the bourbon, same as the Tawny, same as the Apera, but the cask influence, and the same time in the cask, same altitude, same new make.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting experiment that you're going through to taste them all lined up next to each other.
So what are your plans with this one? Obviously, this is still kind of a work in progress. It hasn't been decanted yet or anything like that. It's still in the cask?
No, this has been decanted.
Oh, it's been decanted.
Been decanted and bottled. I'm just holding it back at the moment. Sorry.
We're getting a sneak peek.
I just thought it'd be good to have a sneak peek. And someone said, "Are you taking pre-orders?" And the answer is yes. Send me an email and I'll take a pre-order. Because at the whiskey capital event in Canberra, some people fell in love with us and actually rewrote some of my tasting notes for me, because they came back and just said, "Oh my God, this is incredible," and wrote some fantastic notes. So yeah. So this, I'm not releasing this until July, when I'll release that and a couple of other whiskies that I've decanted as well. But yeah, so that's the plan with this whiskey. But interesting other plans in the mix as well, particularly when you talk about honey with this. I'm actually going back up to Capity for the Epic in the Valley again, and there's a guy I'm meeting up there who does mead, and he does mead in honey casks. And so I'm actually going to grab some of these honey casks and see what I can do with them. I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to give it a crack. Put some new make in a ex-honey cask or something and see what turns out. And then if it doesn't turn out any good, do what Tim Duckett does and put it into something else till it behaves.
Emma and I were going to go to the Epic in the Valley, but we unfortunately will be at the Hobart Whiskey Show same time. So too many events on at the moment.
Yeah, right. Bugger. Well, you have to make it one year, because it is pretty unforgettable. It's kind of they're fun memories, but it's great because you're there with a whole lot of other producers as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm going to run through some of the comments. Paul loves rum cask whiskies, and I absolutely agree. Like, I feel like rum is such an identity in Australian spirits, and it shocks me that we don't use more rum cask.
Yeah, I agree.
I know that Bundaberg probably doesn't give that many out, but we've got Beanley, we've got Inner Circle, we've got, even Ian from Iniquities making his own rum. So yeah, it's great to see a rum cask. And for a Tassie whiskey that probably wouldn't even get a look in at a rum cask normally. So yeah, Leo, fresh comb honey and honeycomb violet crumble. Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, Lark Quiet Cannon. Yeah, I don't know which rum cask that was. It might have been Thunderbird, I'm not sure. Cara have launched their first rum. Well, I might launch the poll and see what everyone picked as their favorites. Now, Mark, we can see this, but they can't, so don't be spoiling it with a running commentary like
Okay.
it's the Girl Hand Races.
Oh my God, oh no.
Yeah. And I'm going to get to Michael's question because this is actually, I'm really keen to know as well. Was there a temptation to leave this one in the barrel for as long as possible? Like, are you hoping like in the future to keep pushing the whiskeys to stay in a bit longer and then maybe perhaps even move to a larger cask size?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So I started with 20-litre casks to get out of the gate quickly, then quickly moved to 50-litre casks, and now I've got 128-litre casks and 220-litre casks as well. So I've got an array of casks now, and I've got a sort of an 8-year barrel program in play as we speak to rotate them and move some of them out and go to bigger casks for longer periods of time. Just because I'm finding that the Snowy Mountains is just a beautiful area to influence whiskey, and the longer it stays in the cask, the more it seems to respond to the environment, which is exactly what I want it to do, to express what the Snowy Mountains is like.
Yeah, cool. I feel like everyone in the chat is letting me know that of all these rum casks whiskeys that I've never even tried, because I actually can't really drink rum, so I mostly ignore the whole category. Some of the tall heights, I don't know what it is. Flor de Caña makes my throat swell, so now I'm like, if it's not rum, like I'll drink Sailor Jerry because it's not rum, but like that's it. That's where I draw the line.
Right.
Paul was mentioning Lord Byron rum as well. Yeah, Karu rum from the Blue Mountains and stuff. So yeah, there's plenty of rum out there. Husk as well, I think. Husk rum is another one.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul's. I need your validation, Paul, when it comes to rum because I know nothing about it. And yeah, Blackgate's making rum. Blackgate makes rum, not making. Janice has been at it for quite a while, and she's absolutely amazing. So, but
the other thing in Australia that's just starting to take off now is agave, and you'll soon see some ex-agave casks being used for new make spirit in the whiskey industry as well. So that'll be quite interesting, that influence. And I have no clue what it's going to turn out like, but that's the fun of it. Yeah,
it's going to be really interesting. I'm lucky enough to be friends with a guy who's making the Australian, it's not tequila because I can't call it tequila. And I think I called it something else. And then that's created a whole nother hullabaloo in terms of phrasing and appropriating words and stuff like that. I'm not 100% over it, but like all over what's going on. But I am friends with the guy who's making it, and he is supremely talented. So I'm really excited to see how that works out, and the follow on for whiskey as well. But I think Ollie was about to say everybody has voted. It's time for the drum roll.
Well, before I hit our results, there's a it's called Black Snake Distillery, and they're not far from the Snowy Mountains. They're making agave spirit. I think they call it ASP.
That's right, they do.
So if you can maybe grab a cask from them to do an experiment, that'd be, I think you'd be one of the first.
They're a wonderful, wonderful couple, actually. They're coming up to Epic, so I'll be talking to them about that. Amazing. My hat goes off to these producers. You know, an agave plant takes 10 years to mature, 200 kilograms when they harvest it. Out of that harvest, they end up getting 20 litres of new make spirit. I mean, that's just crazy when you think about the production time that goes into that. So, yeah, fantastic. They're good people.
All right, here we go.
The Apera by a wide margin, actually, in the rum cask. I definitely
that's great.
Agree with everyone.
Excellent.
That's amazing.
We'll get in the Apera's, the Apera and the rum side by side. I don't know if you're seeing that or not. Can't quite.
Funny with the background.
Is that doing weird things with the background?
Yeah, the green screen
If I
effect.
stand up on.
Yeah. At least it's not the cat face, you know?
No, that's not working. It's a good attempt, but it's just not working.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm glad. It's nice to be able to share my whiskey with people and get some feedback. That's fantastic.
So we've also organised a little discount code for everyone tonight. So I've just shared the link. It's 10% off. Obviously, $200 and over is free shipping with us as well. So jump on if you enjoyed any of these whiskeys. Support Mark, what he's doing, so he can keep making great Aussie whiskey. And yeah,
that'd be fantastic.
Thank you so much for everyone for coming, and to Mark for sharing his time and of course his whiskey with all of us. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to your tequila cask finish release. Just saying, if it we will be hounding you to make sure
that's it.
That experiment happens. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. If you have any last minute questions, otherwise I think we're all gonna head off for the evening, and we'll see you either
thank you very
much. In Hobart or
you've got one question from Michael T. In the bars, is there Apera out in retail bars?
Yes. My whiskey is in a few bars in Jindabyne. It's funny about that. So in the Snowy Mountains, there's a few bars. In Canberra, I'm in Farrah's Liquor Collective, and I'm in a bar in Balmain called Field Blend. So very, very few, but I'm online or through the whiskey list. So you can Google me online, Snowy Mountain Spirits, or through the whiskey list.
Amazing.
And I'm always happy to chat to anyone about anything, including whiskey.
Yeah, that's a door you've opened now, and everyone.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. I think it's a wonderful community that we have in the whiskey industry, including drinkers and consumers. That's because we get the best feedback from consumers, and we can actually adjust what we produce based on the feedback. So I totally welcome it and very open to it. So anyone that wants to contact me, just look me up and shout out.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you to everyone for coming along.
Thank you.
Leo, I'll see you in Hobart, but everyone else, I'll probably see you at the next tasting or at the next show that we've got coming up. But yeah, enjoy.
Great. Thank you. And thanks, Emma. And thanks, Ollie. And thanks, everyone, for turning up.
Hey, Mark, do you want to stay on for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah.
Night, everyone.
Take care.